Hi everybody, I'm Mike McCrory, and this is Would You Make It? In my last video, I turned the rooks and bishops from the spalted maple and walnut logs that my client provided. Now I'm going to step it up a notch and work on the kings and queens. So let's get started. Just like with the other pieces I've turned, I will start by drilling a hole in the bottom so that I can add lead weights and epoxy later. I'm starting with the kings, which are the longest pieces. These will be a little more than 4¼ inches tall, or about 110 millimeters. When I made these blanks, I did not have that much wood to work with, so I economized and cut them to length, neglecting to consider the fact that I needed a portion to fit in the chuck. So I would have been smarter to cut them about 1/2 inch longer. Apart from the base, which is about 1¾ inches in diameter, the rest of the piece will be narrower, so I will turn the rest of the length down to a smaller diameter using the parting gouge. Next, I will mark some of the prominent places where the diameter changes so that I can rough out the shape. This part is where the cross will be, so I'm turning it down to an even smaller diameter. And now with the spindle gouge, I will gently taper the body of the king. Then I'll use a skew chisel to cut a bead at the top of the base and to round everything over. Because I don't have a lot of wood to work with, it was hard to bevel the bottom because it was so close to the chuck. Now I'll use my fingernail spindle gouge to work in that small piece, and then I'll switch over to the larger spindle gouge to finish up tapering the body. Now I can work on the crown. I'll use my existing king to mark out some of the important points. This part will have 3 beads, so I will begin by roughing out the first one with a parting gouge, and then I will use the skew chisel to round it over nicely. The next bead is narrower, and the third bead is even narrower than that, so I will use my narrow parting gouge to get things down to the right diameter, and my skew chisel for rounding things over. The bottom of the crown was in the way and blocking me from using the skew chisel, so I trimmed it down before I could round over the smallest bead at the top. Now I'll just smooth out the sides of the crown and round over the top. I need to carve the cross at the top of the crown, and I need to go in at an angle, so I'm marking the positions to plan out where I'm going to cut, even though I won't be able to see those marks while it's turning. And now I'll cut in with a skew chisel on an angle. Now I need to finish up with the sphere at the top of the cross, and I want to proceed very carefully so that I don't knock the piece off center while it's turning. This is where you can see that the piece is a little too short because the point of the tailstock is going to leave a hole at the top. All I needed was another 1/16 of an inch and it would have been okay. To conceal that hole, I'll fill it with Starbond CA glue and then sprinkle on a few wood shavings. After a few hours, I sanded it off and cleaned up some of the excess CA glue. But unlike wood glue, I can spray a finish over the CA glue and it won't be noticeable. The cross doesn't look like a cross yet, so I'll use my grinder to flatten two sides. It's pretty easy to do this. You can also do it with a disc sander, but I would have had to do some disassembly to remove the guard that goes around my disc sander, so this was easier. I flattened it as much as I could. The limiting factor was the sphere at the top. If I had made it a little smaller, then I could have made the cross a little thinner, but I think it looks okay. And the last step is to cut off the bottoms of the two kings. Next, I will turn the queens. I'm going to make 4 of these, 2 from walnut and 2 from spalted maple, so that each player has a spare for pawn promotions. The walnut pieces are longer than the maple pieces, so I don't have to worry too much about the length and ending up with a hole from the tailstock after it's finished. Just like with the other pieces, I will turn the base to the correct diameter and then mark the positions of the important transitions using my queen as the template. Now I'll create the 3 beads, just like I did for the kings. And now the most interesting part of this piece is the crown. I used the skew chisel to make the profile of the crown straight, although I could have used a spindle gouge and added a bit of a curve. Then at the top of the crown there is a rounded portion that has a smaller diameter, so I will use the narrow parting gouge to trim down the diameter and then use the skew chisel to round it. I'll finish up the base and then taper the body with a spindle gouge before releasing the other end from the tailstock. And the last part is to release it from the tailstock and then turn a small sphere at the top of the crown. As you can see, this one was long enough so there's no hole in the top. There's a bit of chipping along the top rim of the crown, but I can sand that out pretty easily. Just to show you the difference with the shorter maple blank, you can see how the point of the tailstock will leave a hole in the top. So I will patch that with CA glue and sawdust just like I did for the Maple King. Now I will use my Dremel tool with a 1/4-inch sanding drum to finish up the crown. The spalting is going to look amazing on these pieces after the finish is applied. And here's the walnut one. I'll cut off the bottoms of the 4 queens, and now the kings and queens are done. That leaves just the knights, and they will be the star of the next video. So I gotta ask, would you make it?